we bought this chair, we bought this. We didn't do it as individuals, we did it as a company. You can do the same thing with real estate. That's all a co-op is. All of you own a percentage of it. You are self-employed. If you live here and you own this, you're self-employed. Does that make sense? You own a business, which means you own a piece of this that you see here. So when you say you have nothing, that is wrong. That is a lie. Co-op is a business. You're part of it, and it means you own this. And it's your decision whether or not you want to refinance, meaning pay it off and pay all this money. And I'm going to ask you again for what? I'm just curious what it's for. And maybe you should consider, before you sign anything, finding out what the money is going for, because I haven't heard anything yet, but I don't know. Co-op, ownership, refinance, questions?
Who owns it if I take the $40 million loan?
You still own it, but you owe $40 million and you can't sell it at market rate. So I prevent you from selling the property at the market. I put a lid on it for the length of time for 45 years instead of the 10 years you have currently. Does that make sense? A normal loan does not say to you, keep it affordable. If you go to Citibank and you own a home right now, and they're not going to come back to you and say, well, I don't want you to paint it this color. I don't want so-and-so to live there. There's none of that. You refinance it, you own it, you get a little bit of cash out. But this deed has a restriction on it that says you cannot go to market. And that was not the original agreement, it's my understanding, right? That was not the original agreement. The original agreement was after it's paid off, you go to market. Does that make sense? So now when you refinance, that's over. Does everybody understand the nature of refinance? Which, as a banker, understand, when I was a bank, I loved you when you refinanced, because I made money. So you come to me, I said, oh yeah, refinance. Come get the loan, raise your term up, take more money, and then I make money. You're like a commodity. So refinancing is a beautiful thing. You get a car loan, I love it when you pay off the car loan and borrow more money. Why? Because I make money off of you. That's how, as a bank, I make money by you refinancing. Where you're safe is when you pay the thing off and you don't owe anybody anything. Does that make sense? I'm not asking you to refinance because I'm doing you a favor. Citibank or any other lender is not going to lend money to you to do you a favor, despite what you might hear.
Right.
I know I used to compete against them, and I beat them for a number of years in government loans. A number of years. Questions? Do you understand refinance? That's my whole thing I want you to come away with. What the nature of refinancing is and what it is that you own. Ownership. Even in a co-op, it means you own something that has value right now. If you live here and you're on title here, your parents are, you do have something. Don't tell me you don't, because you do. Of course, you can take that, borrow against it, and raise the value up too high, which is what happened to most of America. There's your mortgage crisis right there. Questions?
Basically, what you've been paying in, if you own a place here, what you've been paying in every month, it's like it's going into the bank for you. And when you pay it off, 10 years from now, you're going to have all that back because you're going to own the place and it's yours to sell or whatever you want to do with it, right? And if you refinance, that money comes out of the bank and you don't have it anymore, right?
Not only, you will still have your place, but your ability to sell it will be hampered by the fact that there's a restriction on it. When this is paid off in 10 years, the restriction goes away. Do you hear what I'm saying? You sell to whoever you want, just like everybody else in this neighborhood. You sell to whoever you want at the market rate. In 10 years, the restriction goes away. This is not a normal loan. This is not a loan where there is a restriction built into this loan that goes away when the balance is zero. So in 10 years, that is gone. You refinance it, it comes back. And if this place has value, let me mention one other thing about a refinance. If you and I own this place back here, and we have work that needs to be done on it, you and I figure out what the work is, we go get a loan, a regular, plain old, basic loan, because the place has value, we do the work, it's done. Nobody puts a restriction on it, okay, saying you can't sell for block. You get the new loan, you pay it off. For that matter, pay off what you've got now, keep the term at 10 years, and get rid of the restriction. My point being, a normal loan does not have a restriction saying that.
Set it off.
Is everybody with me here? That you can't go to market. Right now you have that. 10 years from now, when the balance is zero, you will not. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
What is the restriction when you sell?
You know what's interesting about the question was, what can you sell it for today versus then? You know, I don't even know. Do you know?
Yeah,
Go.
basically, it's like a, until then, it's like a,
Speaking of Mike, low.
Really?
until 10 years, it's like you, as if you put like a security deposit on the home when you first come in, and there's a formula basically that turns it back around like 3,000, or you know they have like from 3 to 10,000, you know, depending on what kind of subsidy, if you had any subsidy.
Carlos, you can't sell it for squat. That's the answer.
You can't sell it for profit.
Because right now there's a restriction on it that prevents people from wanting to come in and buy. If I told you that and you're about to buy a property and you had money, and I told you, well, you can buy it, but it's only going to go up so much. And I've got this formula in there that will tell you how much it can go up or down. And you can go across the street or down the road and buy something where there's no restriction. Which place are you going to buy? You're going to buy the place where there is no restriction, right? Because nobody's dictating you other than the market about whether it's going to go up or down. So right now with that restriction, you can't get there. But there have been other co-ops, and there is a history of them going for, I believe, the $400,000 range, is what I've heard. Refinance, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Questions?
Explain what you mean by restrictions. Break that down.
Once again, the restriction, explain what I mean by restriction, prevents you from doing certain things. One of the restrictions is this is affordable housing, and so you are forced to sell to someone at a capped rate and not the high dollar amount of what the market bears. That restriction goes away when you pay off the existing loan. Refinancing it, they're saying we're going to keep the restriction there. And we're going to refinance for, what was it, 45 to 50 million, and I'm going to ask you again, what is that for? I mean, you know, I just want to know. I don't know. Maybe it's perfectly valid. I'd like to know. 45 to 50 million dollars is a lot of money. So you explain to me maybe per unit where that money goes and where has the money been going in general. I'd be curious. We talk about this in our first-time homebuyer seminars in terms of condos. When you buy a condo or you buy into a co-op, the first thing you do is you go look at your unit. The reality is you're buying the entire project, a percentage of it. Does that make sense? A percentage of the whole project. You might look at your unit where you live, but the bottom line is the fees that you pay in a lot of cases pay for the whole project.
I sued him for $60,000.
So looking at that project instead of looking at your unit is what you want to do because you are a corporation. You all are like one. And whatever money goes in is going in to fix everything you see. So it's not like you're just buying the unit, you're buying into a whole project. Does that make sense?
Man, they passed out some little pretty sandwiches and it wasn't enough. I was trying to hold my plate where I needed to, but they never came back to me.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce another panelist in this discussion. I'm going to keep Greg right here leading it. Donald Cryer is the property manager for St. Francis Square, and so he can, you know, answer questions about what happened before the co-op was paid off, and what happened when the mortgage was paid off. Yeah.
St. Francis Square.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Donald Cryer. I'm the manager of St. Francis Square. I've actually only been the manager at St. Francis Square for the last 2 years, actually going on 3. But I have worked in this area for the last 10 years. I was the manager at Freedom West for a few years. After that, I kind of worked at the management company and worked at a couple of properties around here, Prince Hall, Jones Memorial, a few other places, Fellowship. So I've kind of been around this area for the last 10 years working. But at the moment, I'm at St. Francis Square. And basically, I came to tell you, St. Francis Square was a limited equity co-op, which basically meant that they had a cap on how much they could sell the unit for prior to that. But they paid off their mortgage in 2004. After 2004, they were able to go market rate. So basically, it just simply means that when someone is in that unit and they would like to sell that unit, they basically put it on the market just like anyone would a condo or a house. They basically put that unit on the market, the unit sells. There's some transitional paperwork that we have to do in the office because it's a co-op, but that's pretty much what it is. And
do you have an idea of what the value of the units were before it went to market?
From my understanding, St. Francis Square was a little bit different entity than as a co-op than King Garvey is, because they never had any subsidy on their property, and they were self-managed, and they've always been limited equity, but it had a cap. So prior to going market rate, I think the units were around 100,000 or so. At the max, basically about 100,000 for a 3-bedroom, because we're primarily 3-bedrooms. So probably about $100,000 for a 3-bedroom. Since they've turned market, the highest we've sold a unit for now is $425. They generally range around $390 and up, and that's what the units are going for now. And those are basically 3-bedrooms. The 2-bedrooms are going for around $300,000, and that's current market time. You know, as years go on, I'm sure as the market picks up, that'll be a little different. But what we have seen is that the market's been stable, very stable. We haven't seen any changes as far as fluctuation in the prices. So we've been pretty stable as far as what we've been able to sell the units for there at St. Francis Square.
Do you have an idea? Right now, it's my understanding the Department of Housing and Urban Development basically oversees the management. You said it's self-managed, meaning who manages it? It's privately managed. So with this organization here, with this co-op, the same thing would happen. In other words, HUD no longer has authority on management. Is that correct?
Yeah, well,
what does self-management mean versus having HUD manage?
Okay. Well, St. Francis Square has always been self-managed, which simply meant that they didn't have a management company on site. It was actually ran by the board of directors. The board of directors actually did the management of the property. They hired a manager to actually carry out or execute the wheels of the board or the members. Here, you actually have a management company that carries out the direction from the board, which is, that choice. But after, I guess, once the mortgage is paid off here, they have that choice. So if you want to go self-managed, or you can bring in a management company, they still would basically carry out the direction from the board of directors. So whether you have a management company or whether the board chooses to do it themselves, it's still the direction from the board given to either a manager or the management company. Should be how it works.
What is HUD's role in the property now versus then?
Basically, HUD's role in the property now is they put the regulations on the property. They put the restrictions or regulations as to what you can and cannot do with it. Once you pay the mortgage off, those restrictions kind of go away. Then it's actually controlled by the board, by the bylaws, by the CCNRs, by those documentations that you put on the property to control, the way this property operates.
Nice.
Meaning self-management means it's your decision. If you want to bring somebody in to manage it, you bring them in. All the decisions are yours versus having another governing body over your head explaining to you what to do. You make the decision, you decide. And also, once again, hear that number, $390, I heard, to $400,000 in value versus what you can sell it for, which is basically you can't because of the restrictions.
Right.
That you're not at market. It's like at the end of 10 years you have value versus having no value now. Does that make sense? So if you refinance and keep the restrictions in, what are you going to sell it for? Who knows? But if you let the 10 years go by, you're at market, you have control.
Yeah. Any other questions for me? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question has to do with King Garvey people answering this in relationship to you. It seems like your approach, where you self-manage, apparently, even under HUD regulations, is a better approach than to bring in a management company, it would seem. because it would seem that the board would have more control over that and probably would be able to reduce costs. What do you think? Carlos, what do you think? And Sharon, what do you think? Yeah, what do you think?
Actually, I've always been kind of indifferent to the approach. The way I've always seen it, and I've been around co-ops for the last 10 years, I'm a registered cooperative manager, and the way I've always looked at it is the board should have control of it regardless of whether they just bring in a manager to manage the site or whether they bring in a management company. The board should have that control. And the board should, whether they choose to go either way, really shouldn't make that much difference. Now, that's how I personally see it. How it happens, you have management companies that get into the whole politics of it all, and they get into other aspects, and they start doing other things because they have a different agenda. But if you bring in the right management company, they should only follow the direction of the board as long as it's legal. And that should be how it goes. That's just how I've always felt about it.
What's your view on it?
He wants the same question to you.
Well, I mean,
Shouldn't it be us?
in terms of the management, it's basically what he said. When the management has different agendas, in this situation, King Garvey,
Managing what?
the management had a relationship with HUD that changed what they did. That changed the balance of power. But I'm gonna try to remain off, because people have heard me, they've heard people here, so I'm getting to people that they never heard before. So, Mr. Cryer might have a few more questions. Then I'm gonna let CPA, Larry Armstrong, into this discussion.
Any more questions for me before we get started?
Any more questions for Mr. Cryer? Thanks,
Yeah, one other. Was there any pressure?
Package today for the entire, but let's just say you guys were in that co-op situation. Would you take it? I think it would be useful.
Well, I can't. I'm familiar with the Square's finances. We don't need that money for anything. I don't know what they're proposing to do with this money here. Whether you, as people who live here, think it's money you need to do something. I don't understand what $40 million would get you. We don't need it there. That's for sure. Our budget.
Trying to get some big payout.
One thing we do is we pay for all our utilities in common. We only have 3 electric meters in the whole place, 1 for each square block, and that sort of thing. And we also about 28% of our carrying charges is water, gas, electricity, garbage, and about 22% goes into reserves. So we build up our reserves so that when we need stuff, we pay for it out of our reserves. So we just did a $1,200,000 project because we had a lot of water leaking in a couple of south-facing buildings. So we had to take off the stucco and redo the windows and all that kind of stuff. We paid for that.
But they basically pay for that
out of our reserve fund. And then we're now doing. We're 45 years old, so the stucco paint, we paint over. Can't do that anymore. As water gets underneath, and lifts the new paint that you just put on there, lifts it off in a couple of years. So now we have to take off all the old paint, put back to the stucco, prep it, put it on. And we're doing four of our 13 buildings, and that's $500,000. So we're going to do them all at a time.
The main thing that he's describing is that the people, they're self-managed, so they do stuff that makes sense. If they borrow money, they're going to borrow as less as possible, and it's going to go to them. In this case, it would be like $40 million, but it go to somebody else that receives it on your behalf. So they're just describing like a regular homeowner that needs something. They don't do too much. They say, what do we need? Okay, we're going to do this over time. And they did all of this after they paid off their mortgage. They got HUD out of their business, and they moved on. And then they're just running like regular homeowners, as opposed to what this would do would make us not homeowners restricted for the next 40 years, and that's the case. So I'm going to also...
for 40 years, we tried...
Real quick.
Philosophically for 40 years, the co-op tried its hardest to avoid HUD.
Exactly.
Okay? We tried to make sure we played within their rules, so that they didn't have any excuse to come in and do anything to us. And after a while, HUD just basically left us alone. We did our reports, but they left us alone because we didn't get in any trouble.
But what happened is after St. Francis paid off their mortgage, that's what they made it harder for other people. They said, okay, that was 298 units that went out of affordable housing. And so other people coming behind them, with a different agenda developed from that.
They can't let St. Francis Square.
But the last 10 years, we weren't that affordable anymore.
They kind of let that.
Because if you had to pay $100,000 to get in, but you couldn't get a loan to do it, that took a lot. You had the only people coming in was somebody who somebody died and left them a lot of money.
Right, I understand.
But the biggest difference is if you're looking at getting $4 million, you're looking at trying to do a whole bunch of things all at one time and getting it all knocked out. The difference St. Francis Square is they just take one item, knock it out, and then have to wait. I mean, there's a lot of things that still need to be done there.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no way for them to do them right now. So they have to basically budget, just like you would if you owned your house. You do one item at a time. If the builders need paint, you may be able, and the way we're doing it right now, we're only able to paint 2 buildings or 3 buildings a year. And that's how they're doing it until they can stretch it out and do it because they have a set budget. Everybody pays, a set amount of carrying charges, and that's what goes into the coffers. And that's what you use to pay all your bills. We have a $2 million operating expense. So it takes $2 million to run that property. So you take all that, and then what you have left over, then you take that and put it into your reserves and you use that money to do those things that need to be done.
Let me say what he just said. He said they have a $2 million operating budget to care for 298 units. We have a $3.5 million operating budget for 211 units, and they've got out of that operating budget, they're doing projects. You know what I mean? That's the difference. Is that this one isn't like a private person taking looking at what they're doing and then doing things carefully. This one is like, well, all this money is coming from HUD. You got other people saying, let's use these people's name and take all of that HUD money. You know what I mean? Take all of this other loans and leave the bill with them. That's the difference. They got out of HUD and they're doing market rate, just running a proper business. Whereas in this case, there's a different agenda.
Plus, we have $1 million or
Walk over
more
to the mic, Sharon.
right now, and our reserves are all full.
Hear from us.
All right. Before I begin, I just want to first start by saying I want to thank Carlos for inviting me to come out here and speak to you today. I've known Carlos ever since my days at San Francisco State, and I think had it not been for him and looking over his shoulder, I probably wouldn't have made it through. But, we came out of parents from the 60s and people who struggled. Professor Shaka, unfortunately, I never had a chance to take your class, and I'm now regretting that, so don't hit me in the head too hard. But I'm really also encouraged. I'm not discouraged by the fact that there aren't a lot of people here because, as a society, we're a very visual group anyway. And as long as the cameras are rolling and they're able to capture everyone, I'm going to make sure that a video of this event gets to every home and every unit and every shareholder who can watch this and look at it at their own leisure. And if they need to rewind it, and I'll make sure they put some chapters in there so they can fast forward the people they want to hear and or not want to hear and go back and so on and so forth. I'm going to try to be very brief because I don't want to really bore you too much. And when I talked with Carlos about a week ago about coming out and speaking with everyone today, and also Mr. Cho, I had a chance to meet with the accountant as well. And unfortunately, with him being a first-generation person here, there may be some language miscommunication, so they asked me to come out and speak. And so I'm kind of partly communicating the accountant's version of this and also my understanding of it as well. I started to come out here and I started to think about using a bunch of numbers and facts and figures and try to prove to everybody that I know accounting, and I felt that just would not be appropriate. But I wanted to try to really think about something that would be very useful for everyone involved with this struggle. Because in fact, and I'm very encouraged because I love a struggle, and I think anybody that comes out of San Francisco State You know, we love struggles out there. We just have created a culture like that. So what I want to talk about today was how do people who come from a culture of poverty meet the challenges of the future? I personally am a product of a culture from poverty. My family knows a lot about struggling, and I think a lot of people in here know a lot about struggling. But we had something a little bit different back then. We still had people, we had family members, we had people that were involved, we still had a lot of intelligent people who were still looking out for our best interests. And now it's time to kind of pass the torch. People that are my generation, Carlos' generation, we have to get involved. I mean, I think today is so monumental, the fact that we're sitting on the eve of the installation of a new president. And how are we going to be impacted by him being installed, if at all? And on top of that, what can we do? There's a belief among people that if you gave every person, both rich and poor, $1 million, you'd find that over a period of time, those that who came from a culture of means will end up with all the money as opposed to those who come from a culture of poverty. And why is that so? Because if most of us in here understand the voices and the echoes of a culture of poverty, things like paying the bill when they come to get you. You know, when they used to be back in the day, they'd come to your door and knock and inquire about the electric bill or inquire about the insurance payment before they cut you off. Now they can just cut you off right from the office. They can come and take your TV, they can take your cable TV and shut you off from the office and turn you back on from the office. Another voice from the culture of poverty is pray for a better tomorrow. Somebody hit the plug here. Okay. Test. There we go. Yeah. The other voices, the echo of a culture of poverty is pray for a better tomorrow. Let's just pretend it doesn't happen. Let's just pretend they're not coming for us. Let's just wait and see what kind of way they've decided to handle us. That's the way that people from a culture of poverty deal with things. And I understand this because my parents grew up like that. And we'd get happy during Christmas and we'd buy all types of things and we'd try to figure out how are we going to pay them. And it's the same thing with tomorrow. Tomorrow people are going to be very excited that a new president is going to be installed. But how will that impact us? How will that make our lives any better? Another echo from the voices of poverty is living paycheck by paycheck. You know, let's not save. Let's not think about the fact that I could walk across the street and get hit by a car. Let's not think about the fact that there could be some other crisis that could come up or that the roof will fall apart. All these types of things, and I understand them, and so I don't get upset when I see people that we talk about. I work for a major CPA, or should I say an African-American CPA firm here in San Francisco, and we deal with how to transfer wealth. And a lot of our clients are people who look like me, and a lot of people who look like you. And these are the people that we deal with, people who sometimes accidentally have done the right thing and now have accumulated a lot of wealth. And they're trying to figure out, what do we do with this wealth? How do I keep it? How do I prevent people from taking it away from me? So these are the kind of things that I understand for people who come from a culture of poverty. People who come from a culture of poverty are looking at, we are very visual people. We see people walking around with gold necklaces on around their neck. We see people wearing all the latest fashion and things of these sort. And that's our identity. That's who we are. And that's all we see is the outer side. But what we really don't see is what's happening with these people. Where are they going? Where are they going to be living? Who's in control of their destiny? Because clearly they are not. Another voice of poverty is that when things just go wrong, we're just going to deal with it. I'm just going to handle it through violence. That'll be the best way that I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to deal with it. Come and get me. Come and pull me out. And these are, as we all know, none of these are viable solutions to carry us into the future. It's unfortunate that not everyone here is going to be able to make it. So the best that we can do is to try to put together some of the coalition and things that Carlos is talking about, that we need to find people who have advanced knowledge, and how do we also elevate the IQ of those people who don't know some of the advanced tools that we've been taught through these various institutions and practical experience. I've worked with a lot of, coming out of a culture of poverty, one of my missions has been working with senior citizens. I've also worked with a lot of challenged youth, and I've also worked with a lot of ex-offenders. And I can tell you that a lot of these people that I've worked with are probably some of the most intelligent people I've ever encountered. What makes them so intelligent? A lot of it, I think, just comes sometimes just from natural talent, adaptability. We've been able to adapt from day one. A lot of times when I tell people where we're going and things that we're doing, I first try to get them to understand who they are. Because I think before you have to understand who you are before you know where you're going. And I try to use a very simple example with them. I remember once I had a chance to go to Africa, and I had a chance to go to Ghana, which was the final port before they sent people off to various areas, whether it be the Caribbean, America, or wherever. And they had these compartments that, when we think of slavery, we only think about men and women, young adults, whatever, but there were also babies there as well. And what they would do is they would take the babies, and I'm going to have to ask Professor Tashaka if I make some grammatical mistakes here, because I can see we've got somebody here that has advanced knowledge, and he can probably even give you more detail. But in short, what they would do was they would put these kids in something that looked like a dresser drawer with about 6 or 7 stacks on it. And they'd just put the baby in there. And they'd leave it there, no food, no water, whatever. And they would look at the ones, and in the morning, half of them would be dead, and the other half would be the strong ones. And it's the strong ones that they went on to the Middle Passage and then came on to America. So that's where people come from. And we're not slaves or any of that stuff. We were people who were enslaved. So I think that needs to be very clear. So once we understand those things, we also understand the adaptability of who we are. And how do we elevate ourselves from a culture of poverty? First, we must come to terms that we're not responsible for our past, but that we are very much in control of our future. How do we get in control of our future? We become in control of our future by understanding wealth. And if we don't, one of the things that is so exciting about this life is that we can find people in the African American community, non-African American community. There is so much information available. You can sit home on a computer and find all the information that you want and to need to understand finances, taxes, things of this sort. The second thing that you have to do is you have to recognize that the second thing is that you have to understand that we have to become more physically responsible. Right now, I know that there's a lot of struggles with the board right now and people sending out a lot of misinformation. That's how you deal with people from a culture of poverty. You deal with them with misinformation. You cause confusion, you put out numbers, and more importantly, which was talked about earlier, you have to employ fear tactics. You have to get people to understand, you have to put people in a position where they feel like they have to make these decisions. They have to go for the $40 million. I mean, when you divide that by 211 units, that comes to about $190,000 per unit. I mean, those of you who live here, I'm sure you could look around your house and say to yourself, are there really $190,000 worth of repairs that need to be done to my house? There may be, I think most people could probably say there might be 10 or 20 or 25, but $190,000 worth of repairs? I don't think so. So we have to be more physically responsible in understanding where and how this money, and you don't need to go to college and you don't need to have an advanced degree to just look at your house and say, wait a minute, does this place really require $190,000 worth of repairs? I mean, there's, even in the Congress, they pass bills and they say that there's always some pork involved. So I think when you look at this kind of $190,000, I mean, I think you don't have to be a college professor to know there's some pork somewhere in there. And who's getting the pork? So we have to understand that. And these are things that, like I said before, you don't have to go to college to understand these. People who even come from a culture of poverty can understand things that's very as simple as this. We also have to understand that how to disseminate information. One of the things that an advanced degree does for you when you go to college, when I say advanced degree, I'm basically speaking of anything beyond high school, which right now that's even becoming a struggle for our young youth today, and we're hoping that soon that will not be a struggle. But how to disseminate certain information. What we do know right now is that even the operation of this co-op today, that there is just, the monies that is being outsourced right now is close to $800,000. That's what's being paid to the management people, the security people, all the people. These are jobs that can be brought in-house. I mean, some of these don't require a very high skill set to be someone to paint a building, someone to be in charge of the maintenance group here. I mean, we have young people sitting around here today with nothing to do. These are jobs that we can transfer right in here, right today. As Carlos mentioned earlier, I've looked at the operating budget. There's a budget here of $3.5 million. And of that, $800,000 of it is just being outsourced. So in very menial jobs, and jobs going to people that are making their livelihood from your money. So that's something that also has to be recognized. Another statistic, and I just want to deal with a couple of them, is we talked also about reserves and we talked about restrictions. Once the loan is paid off, there will no longer be restrictions, or should I say the board will dictate what the restrictions will and will not be. Right now, you have an organization that's already sitting on reserves of $1.8 million. These are funds that HUD and all the other different organizations have said this money must remain intact in the bank, drawing or not drawing interest or very little interest in case something goes wrong. So their interest has already been protected. Another statistic that we have to also understand is how do we reinvest back into our communities? I was very surprised the other day when I looked at some statistics where they determine how many jails they're going to build based on third grade test scores, people that have already been written off. I've looked at some of the statistics where it takes approximately $47,000 a year to incarcerate one person. That's how much, the people have found ways to make money even from criminals. $47,000 to keep one person locked down. I mean, why is it that a guard that holds a gun at San Quentin makes more than a professor sitting in front of a group of students trying to help them to enrich their lives? The last statistic that I wanted to share with you was that a lot of this is all doable. None of this is very far out of reach, or it's not Star Wars or anything like that. The other thing that you have to also understand about finance, which is very relative to finance, is that people who are interested in making money, they never sleep. They're always thinking about making money. And they're always thinking about how to maximize their profits. And in this case, we hear about hostile takeovers of businesses. And why do people do that? Because there's opportunity and it's doable. And the opportunity right now is we have a group of people who come, and not all, because we also have people here that are coming here for the first time to seek the American dream. But what the commonality here is that you're still dealing with a group of people who don't understand finances and don't understand all that is really happening to them. There's a plan right in place where I understand that over $1 million has already been secured of your money, a loan that you will pay on the back end to get you out of here. $1 million. So you're going to have people calling you and saying, wouldn't it be nice to live in Iowa? What state would you like to live in? Anywhere but San Francisco. Would you, what about Montana? Choose a state. And so $1 million of your money is being marketed to you to move you out of here. And whatever it takes, that's what will happen. Whatever tactics. So for those of you who may want to live in Kansas, it's available. And there are people who are more than willing right now to relocate you. But the funny thing is, you will never, ever be able to get back into San Francisco. And you need to understand that very, very clearly. People do not understand. And when you are physically responsible, you understand how much more inexpensive it is to jump on Muni and go downtown to your job than to own a car. And all the other different things that are associated with everything being so close. So we need to understand this, that there is already a plan in place. But what I'm also encouraged by is the fact that just by seeing this new president, we understand the power of being a community organizer. We understand that there are a lot of people here who want to get involved and understand what's happening to us. I spoke with Carlos. I've known him for a long time, and I can tell you right now, and even though he may not broadcast it very much, he doesn't come from a culture of poverty. Comes from a culture of ways and means. His family, his own businesses, they've done all kinds of things. But I think it's very courageous of him to get involved, to come back to the community and just understand something is wrong here. And what I'm also encouraged by is the fact that we are going to speak with every person in this community individually, and whatever means it takes to get them to understand what is really happening to them, to get them to understand that once they leave San Francisco, there will be no returning. There just won't. There is already a campaign that this land is worth too much more for high-rise condos and alike. And they will use, and I know for a fact that Carlos has been fighting these people for at least 3 years, and that this campaign is only worsening. And things are getting the stakes are getting much higher every single day. So the question is, what can I do as a person, as a homeowner, as a shareholder? What can I do to reverse the situation? What can I do to get involved? The first thing you have to do is understand the importance of your board, and that your board dictates the terms around here. Not HUD, not the property management group. You have to understand these things. You also have to understand how to manage the board. All board members do have business hours where you can go in and communicate any problem, complaint, or suggestion to them. Determine whether or not the board is working for you or against you. This is also very important. And I think self-preservation, any board that has your self-preservation and self-interest in mind, that's a board working for you. A board that is working to get you out of here, that's not a board working for you. But you all have the power to determine how to manage your board. The last thing I suggest to you is to learn how to dream. And that is how to transfer wealth. Those of you, those grandmothers, young mothers, all of you, what's going to happen to your children? Who's thinking about that right now? Who's making those decisions? Clearly, right now, it may appear that you're not making those decisions, but you do have a chance and an opportunity to make a stance on who is going to handle and how your future will be handled. Also, in terms of people who have means, they always think about where they're going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Have you asked yourselves that? Where are you going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, so on and so forth? What is going to change in your life? What values are going to change in your life between now and then? And finally, what challenges will the future look like? I was at the Apple store the other day, and I was noticing that they had very small tables with Macs on them for children. I'm talking about kids 2 and 3 years old. And they're already developing a culture of people who know how to use computers and people who know how to read. And all this manual labor is on its way out. So what you have to focus on is what's going to happen to you. And it's not that you have to be a scholastic genius and all those type of things, but also we have to understand what are the standards that we use for entrusting our lives and everything else in people. Sometimes those standards are people who look like us. Sometimes those standards are just people who clearly are not profiting from trying to help us advance to another level. And so those are some of the thoughts that I want to leave you with. And all these things are related to finance of some sort. And we have to understand how to control our finance, how to control our communities. The last part I'd like to do is leave this section open for questions and anyone that may have some.
You talked about the finances of the prisons. So how do we get the young folks to understand that it's a new form of slavery that's going on, getting them locked up? How do we change the aspects of them? So you said you work with ex-offenders too, right?
Right. I've worked with a lot of ex-offenders. I've worked with a lot of challenged youth. And one of the questions that I hear all the time, I've even had the chance to work with P. Diddy or Puff Daddy or whatever name he's using these days. And he said something that was also as equal as to the people that I've dealt. I never knew. You know, I've talked to Diddy before, and he said, man, if I knew it was this easy to make money, or if I knew it was this simple to do A, B, and C, man, I'd have been involved with this a long time ago. You know, we talked about adaptability in all these young people. The problem is that they've never been told. Now, we may think that that can't be true. But then if you have to look at the profile of a lot of young people, that, families today are different than they were before. You know, the average youth today, probably 15 or between 15 and 18 years old, are probably born from a mother who's under 20 years old. What life experiences does she have? And probably coming from a single parent home. You know, these are no longer the exceptions. These are the norm of the type of dynamic of families that we live in today. How do we transfer information? Again, I want to applaud a lot of these gentlemen that came down and spoke today. They've been able to disperse a lot of knowledge, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to take advantage of that. But again, to say again, we have to, we understand what procreation is, that human beings have very few natural abilities. Probably the ability to eat and suckle as a child, but most of the things that form us are things that we learn from other people. And the people are, who are we learning from? And what is their road and what is their journey? Okay, that's all I'm going to say for today. But again, I thank you for your time, and I'm hoping again that all of you will get involved with the madness, or not should I say the madness, but actually trying to find a way out of this solution.
So I have one question. Yes. When we are self-owned, when we paid off our mortgage, will we be able to borrow against our share like a first mortgage?
Right. I think one of the things that, and this is something that, I used to do mergers and acquisitions, and mergers are when you bring two companies together and you try to find out what their concerns are and if this marriage is going to work. And it's the same thing with money. I gave the example earlier about if you gave everybody $1 million, that the people of means would probably end up with all the money, and the people who've come from a culture of poverty probably would have very little. So the other thing that we have to understand is you have something very valuable in front of you, but many of the residents here are not really sure what they would do with $1 million. I'm sure if I went around this room and asked each person what would they do with $1 million, I'd probably get 1 million different answers. And so we also have to understand how to transfer wealth, how to manage wealth. You don't just take it all and go out and buy yourself the hottest car on the thing. There's a formula. There are ways to keep longevity. Athletes are finding this out now themselves. A lot of our athletes that come from the hood that have exceptional talent, the next thing they realize they have are money problems. And why am I paying all this out to the government? So one of the things that we are going to do that will be a part of this process, and certainly this 10-year process, is to help elevate the IQ of everyone in here, of how to handle money, how to manage money.
Thank you. I'm going to have Mr. Montgomery say a few words, and then I'm going to have some music, just, chill us out. Okay?
What do you want?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. First, I'd like to just point out a few things that some of you may not know. One, Dr. Shaka.
Hey, Carlos, can you pull the mic up?
Dr. Shaka is one of the main reasons that I've been in San Francisco. He encouraged me in 1965 to stay here and try to help the people in the Western District. Dr. Shaka, Tamarcha Scott, Julian Richardson, and a few others. Another lady that has helped me with the FILLMORE is Ella M. Tyler, who's here, and she's helped all of it. Dr. Shaka and Ella Tyler were among the group that founded the organization that created Martin Luther King Square, Marcus Garvey Square, Malcolm X Square, Jackie Robinson Square, Freedom West, and Hunters Point, and several other projects. But the main thing I want to say today is that all of the residents of this project have a loaded gun in their hands. They just don't know that they have it, and they don't know how to use it. And I'm going to talk about your gun and how you should use it to protect your rights. One, the Constitution gives you the rights of self-defense for your person and your property. There are laws in this country which state that one of the rights you have is freedom of information. You are entitled to know what government does with your taxes, with money supposedly for you, the federal and the state. These people have been telling you that they are getting a $40 million to help you, but they have not told you where they're getting the money from, what is going to be spent for, what are the risks in getting the money. They're keeping that information from you illegally. When I say they, I'm talking about your managing agent, John Stewart and Company. I'm talking about the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I'm talking about the City and County of San Francisco. I'm talking about the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency, all of them. And I have proof that they've all been involved in an illegal conspiracy to deprive you of your rights. And this conspiracy has been going on for more than 8 years. These officials don't like me. That's their problem. If they have any charges against me, make them to me in public or in court. I challenge any of them. They've done nothing. First, your gun, one of the most important bullets in it is the Freedom of Information Act and the Sunshine Act. You, as a resident and as a citizen, can demand that they give you full information on all of this loan, and information on what they're planning to do with the money, how they're going to spend it, who they're going to hire to do the work. If they don't give you that money, they are subject to severe criminal penalties, plus they cannot participate in any government loan program. Use that right. Because if you don't use it, they'll assume that you don't care. That's one message I could like to get to you. Exercise your rights to property for freedom of information. What from where, and for what. Now, with reference to King Garvey, this project is very close to my heart. And I've sort of watched and tried to help and will continue to try to help. This project's problems can be solved very simply if the owners just stand up and exercise their rights for this project to be what they want it to be. Forget about HUD, tax credit, subsidies, and all of this other BS. The residents have the right to decide whether or not they want to have any subsidies. The thing they've been holding over the heads of the people here is the Section 8 subsidies. They don't tell you that the Section 8 subsidies are not related to your ownership. Nobody says that. They said that in order for you to continue to get Section 8 subsidies, you have to borrow this money and do this and do that. HUD pays Section 8 subsidies to private, profit-motivated projects. The same way, and if not in some cases, better than what you get here. So what you have to do is insist that everybody gives you the full information on this Section 8 program and how it works and how it can work separately from the ownership of the unit. Now, related to affordable housing, the owners of this project has no commitment, no legal commitment to the city and county of San Francisco to maintain this property as affordable housing. They do not make all these other property owners in San Francisco maintain their houses as affordable housing. They can charge whatever they want. That's a lie, they're saying. This must be affordable housing. You, as the owners of this property, have the right to do what you want with it, to sell it for whatever price you want it, to pass it on to your heirs. The one trick, they say, in order to get Section 8, you have to do this and that. In order to get Section 8, the only one thing you need to do, that is to follow the laws and regulations related to Section 8 subsidies alone, not ownership. Section 8 subsidy law says you must have an income less than a such and such amount, that's all. You tell them what your income is, and they tell you how much subsidy you are entitled to based on your income. They don't have the right to tell you who should manage your property, who should own it, who your board should be. And there's so much lies and deceit that's been going on with respect to this property that it's sickening. I hope, and I've talked to some people in Washington about things here, and there's indication, I can't promise it, but I can say that I believe and have been encouraged that if the residents here as owners stand up and face HUD, the redevelopment agency, the city and county of San Francisco, the state of California, and even the federal government under the Bush administration, and state what they want, that they own this property, and what they want, you will get backing out of Washington, D.C. You just have to stand up and fight for your rights. If you don't, you deserve whatever you get, which will be nothing. Any questions?
Okay. You can let Tony, you can, he's going to say a few words. Tony Dunbar, reflection. Then we're going to get some music going with Earl right here. Play that Yoshi's.
My name is Tony Dunbar. In another life, in another world, on the weekends and in the evenings, I'm known as Reverend Tony Dunbar. And I just want to say that we're at a cusp in history. This is a time that has not been seen since emancipation. This right here, what we're looking at today and tomorrow, this is something that I never thought I would live to see. First of all, I never thought I would live to see Martin Luther King assassinated. Then I didn't think I was going to ever live to see the holiday. And I certainly wasn't expecting to ever live to see Barack Obama in my entire lifetime. So I'm not going to rehearse for you any of the King's speeches. You know them. Those that you don't know, you can find them. I will say that his whole thing was about this dream about character instead of color, and this dream about freedom and unity and about justice instead of just us. And then somebody killed the man. And people like me, we threw up our hands and we said, God! See, nothing gonna change. It's the same way as it was before, it's just dressed up in modern clothes. People are the same, people are gonna be the way they are. Things are never gonna change. It's always gonna be like this. You're gonna be you, I'm gonna be me. This is how it is, and that's just never going to change. And people like me, we went 40 years with a chip on our shoulder. Now I'm serious. With a chip, it's like, yeah, right. I never told my grandson that he was ever going to grow up to be president. Never said I never would make my mom say something like that. And I celebrated Dr. King on the assassination day, not on the birthday. People like me had our hearts broken. And we're pretty much done with all of that. And then here comes this kid, and I say kid because of his age relative to mine. This kid comes along and starts talking about, yes, we can. I'm saying, no, we can't. Why are you even tripping? Why you even think people are going to change? This is the way people are. This is the way the situation is. No matter how you gloss it up, dress it up, pretty it up, this is the way it is. It can never change. And his kid comes along and says, yes, it can change. I said, well, I can't change because you just don't know my story. You don't know how bad I've been hurt. Yeah, that's what they did to me. They beat my mama and they shot me and they whoop, whoop, whoop. And they did all these things to me. They kept me from getting a house and kept me from getting a job and kept my son out of school and put me in jail and they did all these things. They did this to me. They didn't change. I'm not changing because I need to protect myself. He said, yes, you can. I said, but I lost my house and I lost my car and I don't have... Nothing has changed. And he said, yes, things have changed. Yes, we can. And you know, something in me sort of sat down. And I looked at the youngster. I said, you know, this kid might be right. Something in me laid down and said, yes, actually, we can. And then when I began to see the other people that brought into that dream, people who were younger than me and older than me, people who looked like me and who didn't look like me, all standing up to say, yes, we can, my spirit sat down. And I put all my weapons of war, my emotional and psychological weapons of war, I put them away. It's like I told you, I was Reverend Dunbar, it's like the Bible says, I beat my sword into a plowshare. I said, I think I'm going to go to work. I think I'm going to stop fighting. Start working. So rather than belabor that point, I want to talk to you about a tomato plant. A year ago today, I had a full-time job and I still couldn't afford to put fresh fruit and vegetables on the table for my family. I could not afford to buy lettuce, cucumbers. I still couldn't afford it, full-time working. And I went to the store, I said, I don't have $5 a pound for tomatoes and $1.50 for some sorry little old lemon about that big. I don't have it. Then I looked at a couple of square feet of land right outside of my door and I said, you know, I'm gonna plant these. I'm about to put down, my grandparents used to do back where we came from, I'm gonna put me some vegetables down. And so I went and I got some seed for the same $5 that I could have spent on 2 tomatoes. And I want you to know that you can do a lot with some tomatoes. You can make a sandwich, a soup, a salad. You can make some sauce. You can make a pizza with some tomatoes. You can do a lot of stuff with some tomatoes. When they $5 a pound, you can't eat. I'm gonna put me some tomatoes right here like my granddad used to do. So I went and I got a package of tomato seed. I dug it up, put the seed there. And after a little while, I had a little shoot.
Yeah.
And then I had a little plant thing. It didn't look too good, but it was coming.
All right.
Pretty soon I had a little bush. The bush got a nice size.
Yeah.
Then I had the little yellow and white flowers.
Okay.
A little bit longer, and I had these little tomatoes. And then eventually I was able to pull tomatoes off of that plant, go put them on the plate, and serve my family food.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to tell you
That's what I'm talking about.
God, however you name God, is the seed. This world, that's the earth, that's the dirt. The care and the love that you give to the idea of justice, unity, peace, that's the preparation you put on the soil. Dr. King was the sprout. Started out a little bitty plant. All that stuff began to grow into a movement, grow into a little bush, and then the bush began to flower. Barack Obama's the flower. But you know what? You are the fruit. And once we mature, we are the fruit. Once we are matured and we are plucked up and served out to the world, now the world can have what it needs. It can have its proper nourishment. It can have its strength and its growth. Now the world has the power that comes from being fed by the right thing. So I want to encourage you today, you take heart. You are at the cusp of history. This is not going to happen 2 times. And here we are to see it. Isn't that wonderful? Here we are to see the change in the way the whole world runs. No matter what happens in 8 years or 4 years or 2 weeks from now, we can't unring this bell. This is done. Now we can say to our children and grandchildren, you could grow up to be president, baby. And mean it. Not lying no more. Trying to make them feel good about a bad situation. We can mean it. And our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will never know the difference. They won't know why we're so hot and bothered about it. Because it'll just be the way things are for them. So I want to encourage your heart. I want to encourage your heart. Keep your head up. Look what you did. Look what you did. You've changed the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Let the spirit hit us through the music. Mr. Earl Davis. Okay.
Lance Burton's my name. I run an organization known as Planet FILLMORE. Planet FILLMORE is an alternative media that's growing into something that I'd like to get everybody in this King Garvey Square to be involved with ultimately. I grew up here. Bourbon Street does not run through Garvey Square, but Bourbon Street in 1957 was hallowed ground. Bourbon and Ellis Street is where my granddad brought me to in 1957. At that time, the Rattlers Motorcycle Club was down between Ellis, Fillmore, and Steiner. The barbershops, the barbecue joints, the clubs, the jazz musicians, the singers, everybody from Lady Day, Miles, Coltrane, you name it. The white musicians, the black musicians, they made this hallowed ground between 1939 to 1965. And we have a legacy here. We have a duty, we have a fiduciary responsibility in this community to raise the level of talent that is here now. And Planet FILLMORE wants to grab that talent, wants to showcase that talent, and wants to continue that legacy of entertainment, culture, art, literature that one can find on display at Marcus Bookstore. This is Obama time, but Marcus Garvey had a time, and that's what Marcus Bookstore is all about. It's about raising the consciousness of the African American community, or the new Africans, as Professor Oba Tashaka said earlier. We have got to get our conscience in the right frame of mind so that because I'm telling you, we have a fiduciary responsibility to carry on the legacy of what once was. The folks that are here now were touched by those folks who were here, who came here in the 1940s, the 1950s, to establish a black community here in San Francisco. And as Thomas Fleming of the Sun Reporter once said, we ain't going back. We are here to stay. And as a result, what folks have to realize is this Obama time means you have some accountability, you have some responsibility to take care of, and I hope that you all will respond in kind. What I want to do right now is read from an address that was given in Berlin in 1964 at the Jazz Festival. God has wrought many things out of oppression. He has endowed creatures with the capacity to create. And from this capacity has flowed the sweet songs of sorrow and joy that have allowed man to cope with his environment and many different situations. Jazz speaks for life. The blues tells the story of life's difficulties. And if you think for a moment, you will realize that they take the hardest realities of life and put them into music, only to come out with some new hope or sense of triumph. This is triumphant music. Modern jazz has continued in this tradition, singing the songs of a more complicated urban existence. When life itself offers no order and meaning, the musician creates an order and meaning from the sounds of the earth which flow through his instrument. It is no wonder that so much of the search for identity among American Negroes was championed by jazz musicians. Long before the modern essayists and scholars wrote of racial identity as a problem for the multiracial world, musicians were returning to their roots to affirm that which was stirring within their souls. Much of the power of the freedom movement in the United States has come from this music. It has strengthened us with its sweet rhythms when courage began to fail. It has calmed us with its rich harmonies when spirits were down. And now, jazz is exported to the world for the particular struggles of the Negro in America. There is something akin to the universal struggle of modern man. Everybody has the blues. Everybody longs for meaning. Everybody needs to love and be loved. Everybody needs to clap hands and be happy. Everybody longs for faith. In music, especially this broad category called jazz, there is a stepping stone toward all of these. I present you with El Rey Savad, Mr. Earl Davis, who spans over 50 years of playing music, a student of Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, and some of the greatest living legends and those who have come before him. He stands on their shoulders. And we are fortunate to have him here in San Francisco in FILLMORE, the Jazz Heritage district. And I tell you, we do walk on hollow grounds. For anybody who doesn't know it, you may be a relative of one of those powerful, great musicians of that day. And by the way, that expression that I read was from Martin Luther King's address in 1964 at the Berlin Jazz Festival. Peace out, y'all. Check out, by the way, check out www.youtube.com/MarcusBooks as again, an alternative media source for content that has to do with us. And I see some very personable characters here that I'd like to turn that channel over to. All right?
Music is very important in our lifestyle, so I hope I can lift your spirits with what I chose to play today. I'm going to play one song written by Miles Davis, two by Duke Ellington. And before I play, I have a composition that was written by a saxophone player, a friend of mine who's passed away. We used to work together a lot in New York back in the day, and I did the arrangement on this, and I'll let this play, and then I'll come up and play this song for you. Okay. Guy by the name of Bobby Blue Bland. I was like 16 when I left Houston. And when I got to New York, I jumped ship and I stayed in New York, and Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk took me under their wing. I later met Malcolm X and became a black nationalist. And at 71 years old now, I mean, I've seen a lot, been around the world any number of times. And I was just recently in New York for the holidays. I had some gigs back there during the holidays. And before I came back, I guess it was about a week after the incident that had happened on the BART. For some reason, I never heard anything about it. And I heard about it a week later. And man, it was a drag to have to come back here to an incident going down like that. And all of the indignities that I remembered going through in Texas bubbled up. I had suppressed all of that negative crap, but it bubbled back up to the surface, and I was fucking pissed. I mean, I was really angry. But somehow, I remember my teachings from my parents and my grandmother. I was able to suppress that again and just move on. And I would just like to say to all the adults here, you can communicate with these young people because they're the ones who's going to take our place. We got to influence them the best way we can and encourage them, motivate them to do better. And I have one thing to say to the young men. You don't have to pull your pants all the way up, but at least put them on your hip. Okay? And read a book. That'll help a lot. You know, we all complain about our lifestyle and problems we have, and you know, I used to say, well, you know, what are we gonna do? So I met this cat, Dr. Benjamin Carson. He's a brain surgeon, head brain surgeon at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and then he had a book came out later called Gifted Hands. And I read the book. I hadn't been reading for years, but after reading that book, I started reading all over again, and when I got back here to San Francisco, Marcus Books had paperbacks of that same book, and they were like $6. So I spent $60. I bought 10 of those books, and I gave them out to all the little cats in the neighborhood that's scrambling. I guess you know what scrambling means. Anyway, and I told them, whoever read the book, to do an essay on it and get it back to me, and I'd give them $100. So out of the 10 guys, only one guy came back. The least one I didn't expect to do it, he was the one, and it was a beautiful essay of what he had gotten from reading his book. And at the time, when he said, hey, OG, here's my essay, I read the book. So I said, well, you caught me in the middle of the month, and my budget is it's a little flaky right now, but come back on the first of the month, and I'll hook you up. I'll give you a Franklin, you know. So sure enough, you know, later on, a couple of weeks later, my little bread came in, and I gave him $100. And since then, I was at the Queen Ada's hanging out with the older brothers, playing dominoes, and conversation came up, and I told them about this kid I'd given the book out, and one of them came back and wrote this beautiful essay out of what he got out of it. So the guy said, man, you know, that's so-and-so's nephew. And I said, well, I'll be damned, it's a small world. I didn't know the kid was even related to him, but he had helped this kid get a seaman's license, took him down to the Merchant Marines, and now the kid this was like 4 years ago, and the boy is doing really great. So I said, well, at least I spent $60 on 10 books, and I saved one soul. I feel good about that. You know, it's just one guy, you know. So I'm saying things like that we can all do. You know, if you can't go up and preach to somebody, you got to do this, you got to do that, blah, blah, blah. You know, just like I say, spend some money, buy a book, and give it to somebody, you know. Who knows what would happen, you know. So I felt pretty good about myself for doing that. Anyway, I'm going to play this composition by Miles Davis. It's called Blue and Green. It's a blues. And let's see. Do I have that in? Yeah.
You gonna be out here for a minute? Huh? I'm gonna go get that fish and we take it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right.
Mr. Mercurini.
How are you?
So, how you doing, man?
Late but present.
Sounds good. Sounds alright.
Test. I turned the switch off. Yeah, I'm sorry. Start it.
1, 2, 3, 4.